Hello, my sweetheart. Today is a good day. Let's begin very softly together. Before you give this day away to noise, to pressure, to people who pull at you, to old habits of over-explaining and overreacting, I want you to come back to yourself for a moment. Just breathe out slowly. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw loosen. Feel how much wisdom there is in one honest exhale. You do not have to rush to meet every energy that reaches for you. You do not have to prove you are good, kind, innocent, worthy, intelligent, or right every time someone misunderstands you. You do not have to step into every little fire just because it is burning. There is a different way to live, a calmer way, a wiser way, a way that leaves your spirit intact at the end of the day. And I want that for you very much. Because so many dear people are tired, not from life itself, but from all the reacting, all the answering, all the explaining, all the trying to make themselves understandable to people who have already decided not to understand. That is a terrible way to spend your beautiful life force. So let me say this very gently at the beginning, the way I would say it if you were sitting right in front of me and I could take your hands in mine. You do not need to prove yourself. You need to keep yourself. That is the lesson. That is the healing. That is where peace begins. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves your inner weather. Not every comment deserves your nervous system. Not every misunderstanding deserves a courtroom inside your mind. And this is why I want you to ask yourself, each time something rises up and wants to pull you into drama, is this really worthy of my attention? Just that, one quiet question, not asked with fear, asked with dignity, asked from the deepest part of you that is tired of handing out its precious energy to every passing storm. My peace is my power. I choose my response. I trust the universe. Let those words settle in you. They are not dramatic words. They are strong words. They say, I am no longer available for every disturbance. And that is not coldness, sweetheart. That is self-respect. Calm is not weakness. Calm is power that no longer needs to shout. I think one of the great misunderstandings in life is that people confuse reaction with strength. They imagine that if they answer quickly enough, defend loudly enough, explain long enough, or correct every false thing said about them, then somehow they have protected themselves. But very often all they have really done is pour their life force into something unworthy of it. They leave the moment shaky, upset, replaying it, carrying it into the next hour and the next conversation, and even into sleep. The other person may have moved on long ago, but the one who reacted is still paying the energetic bill. That is why calmness is so powerful. Calmness says, I do not have to enter every room I am invited into. Calmness says, I may let this pass through the edge of my awareness without giving it my center. Calmness says, I know my truth without performing it. That is not weakness. That is maturity. That is someone who is no longer willing to confuse emotional leakage with courage. There is a beautiful kind of strength in restraint, a beautiful kind of strength in the person who can pause, breathe, feel the old instinct to explain, rise up, and then decide, no, my peace matters more than this moment's drama. You see, the reactive mind always believes the moment is larger than it is. It says, answer now, fix now, defend now, explain now. This is everything. But the wiser self asks, will this matter tomorrow? Does this belong in my body? Is this actually mine to carry? The reactive mind rents out the soul by the hour. The peaceful mind keeps the keys. And I want you to keep the keys, my dear. I want your peace to stop being available for casual damage. Because once you begin to understand that your peace is a form of power, you stop offering it to every disturbance like loose change. Your attention is one of the greatest assets you have. It may be the greatest, more precious than time in some ways, because attention is where life is actually experienced. What you give your attention to becomes your emotional climate. It becomes your inner world. It becomes what your body has to live inside. And so many people do not realize they have been spending attention carelessly. They give it to every text, every tone, every rumor, every imagined insult, every anxious thought, every small piece of drama that floats by asking for admission. And because of that, the mind becomes crowded, the body becomes tired, and peace begins feeling like a distant thing. But peace is not always far away. Sometimes it is simply covered by misused attention. This is why I say attention is currency. Attention is currency. You are paying with your life when you spend it. So spend it where life can grow. Spend it on truth, on kindness, on your work, on your body, on your healing, on beauty, on real love, on real conversation, on what nourishes. Do not spend it on every little emotional beggar that knocks at the door. The world is full of invitations into distraction, accusation, gossip, confusion, and emotional theater. Not all of them deserve your attendance. The moment you understand this, the whole day starts feeling different. You begin guarding your inner life the way a wise woman guards something sacred, not from fear, from value. Because what you attend to shapes you. What you dwell on feeds you or drains you. What you return to again and again becomes a habit of being. So if you keep returning to drama, you begin living in drama. If you keep returning to peace, you begin living from peace. That is very simple, very profound, very practical. And because I want this to be usable, not just beautiful, I want to give you 3 little questions to ask before you react. Not after, before. Let them become a pause between the stimulus and your old habit. The first is this true? Not, does it feel intense? Not, does it sound convincing? Not, did someone say it loudly? Truth is quieter than drama, my dear. The nervous system often reacts to intensity as if intensity were proof, but it is not. So ask, is this actually true? Maybe the thought in your own mind is not true. Maybe the accusation is not true. Maybe the story you are building from one look, one delay, one text, one moment is not true. That one question can save you from so much suffering. The second question is this mine to carry? I love that question because many kind people keep carrying what belongs to other people's wounds, moods, projections, confusions, and immaturities. They think if they understand it enough, explain enough, help enough, manage enough, then peace will come. But no, sweetheart, some things are not yours to carry. Someone else's disappointment is not always yours to fix. Someone else's misunderstanding is not always yours to untangle. Someone else's inability to meet you clearly is not always yours to compensate for. Ask the question. It is such a freeing one. And then the third, is this worth my attention? There, that is the gate. That is the gentle line in the sand. Because even if something is true, even if something is painful, even if something is uncomfortable, it still may not deserve a large portion of your day. It may deserve a boundary, a note, a choice, a breath, and then release. Not prolonged occupation of your mind, not the throne in your nervous system. You lose peace when you lease out your attention. That is the lesson. We are not talking about being uncaring. We are talking about becoming discerning. A peaceful life requires discernment. It requires knowing the difference between what must be lovingly addressed and what must be lovingly left alone. I would like you to practice this in very ordinary moments. Someone says something unkind. A message arrives with strange energy. An old memory starts to stir. An anxious thought tries to recruit your whole body. Pause. One longer exhale. That exhale matters. It interrupts the old automaticity. Then ask, is this true? Is this mine to carry? Is this worth my attention? You do not have to answer in a hurry. Let the wiser part of you come into the room. Let the deeper self answer, not just the triggered one. You may be surprised how often the answer is no. No, it is not true. No, it is not mine to carry. No, it is not worthy of my life force. And even when the answer is yes to one of those questions, the pause still changes everything. Because now you are responding from consciousness instead of reaction. Now you are choosing what to do with your precious energy instead of letting the moment grab it from you. So if you carry anything from this part today, let it be this. Your attention is sacred. Your calm is strength. Your peace is not weakness. You do not have to show up for every disturbance that calls your name. Some things may pass by without your attendance. Some things may remain uncorrected and still not define you. Some misunderstandings may stay misunderstood and still not take your soul. That is part of growing, part of maturing, part of trusting the universe enough to stop trying to manage every single perception and every single ripple. Breathe again, sweetheart. Let the shoulders soften, and say it slowly with me now. My peace is my power. I choose my response. I trust the universe. That is enough for today. And in the next part, we can go deeper into how to stop over-explaining, stop giving yourself away to noise, and live from that calm, clear center more and more naturally. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. I want you to let that settle before we go any further, my dear, because so many people have been taught the exact opposite. They have been taught that if they do not answer quickly, they are weak. If they do not defend themselves immediately, they are weak. If they do not explain, justify, correct, prove, clarify, and emotionally wrestle every difficult moment to the ground, then somehow they have lost. But that is not wisdom. That is exhaustion. That is the old nervous system mistaking urgency for strength. Wisdom is quieter than that. Wisdom breathes first. Wisdom notices what is happening in the body before handing the mouth permission to speak. Wisdom knows that not every feeling deserves a performance, and not every trigger deserves a full access pass to your peace. So if you have ever felt ashamed for needing a moment, for growing quiet, for choosing not to react, for stepping back from noise, I want to tell you very lovingly that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not slow. You are not weak. You may be learning one of the holiest arts there is, and that is the art of not abandoning yourself in the heat of a moment. That changes a life. It really does. A person who learns to pause begins living in a different world from the person who is dragged by every passing wave. One is always being pulled, the other has begun to stand. And even if that standing is still new and a little shaky, it is real, it is beautiful, it is the beginning of freedom. Most people react because something in them feels grabbed. The body tightens, the story begins, the old wound lights up, and then they move before they have actually arrived inside themselves. The reaction may look fast and convincing. It may even feel powerful for a few seconds. But afterward, what is left? A tired chest, a mind replaying, a stomach in knots, a conversation that keeps living in the body long after it ended. Reaction is expensive, sweetheart. It costs far more than most people realize. Response is different. Response has breath in it. Response has dignity. Response says, I am here. I notice this. And I do not have to let this moment decide who I become in the next 30 seconds. That is such a different way of living. Not because you stop feeling. Feelings are real. Anger is real. Hurt is real. Fear is real. But reality is not the same as rulership. A feeling may visit and still not become your master. A trigger may touch you and still not get to write the whole scene. That is why the pause matters so much. The pause is where you get your freedom back, not 10 hours later, not after the damage. In the pause, in that one long breath, when you do not yet know exactly what you will say, but you know you are no longer willing to be yanked around by the oldest voice in the room. So let me give you this little practice as something very living, something you can use in your own kitchen, your own car, your own relationships, your own hard afternoons. Pause. The first step is exactly what it sounds like. Pause. One breath, not a dramatic breath, not a spiritual performance. One real breath that interrupts the automatic chain. Then acknowledge. Just tell the truth. This is a trigger. Not, this is the end. Not, this proves everything. Not, I knew it. Just, this is a trigger. Something old got touched. Something in me got activated. That honesty alone is already healing because it stops the whole inner world from becoming one giant blur. Then unclench. I love that part. Unclench the jaw, drop the shoulders, soften the hands. Let the body stop bracing as though this one moment is the final judgment on your life. The body must be invited back if wisdom is going to enter. Then select, choose your sentence, or choose your silence, or choose your exit, but choose. Do not spill, do not fling, choose. And then, if necessary, exit. Leave the drama, leave the room, leave the text unanswered for now. Leave the emotional storm before it gets to feed on your life force any further. This is not avoidance when it is done consciously. It is stewardship. It is saying, I will not offer my nervous system up for damage just because somebody else is unregulated. That matters deeply. I think many people are secretly afraid of the pause because they worry that if they do not react right away, they will disappear. But the opposite is so often true. When you react automatically, you disappear into the pattern. When you pause, you return. You come back into your own body, your own eyes, your own truth, your own values. You remember that your life is larger than this one hot moment, and then what comes out of you can be much cleaner. Sometimes your response is one clear sentence. Sometimes it is no sentence. Sometimes it is, I'll come back to this later. Sometimes it is simply not participating. That is still a response. Silence, when it comes from self-possession, is not emptiness. It is presence refusing to be scattered. That is why I want you to stop imagining that every situation deserves a verbal performance from you. Some situations deserve only your awareness. Some deserve a boundary. Some deserve your absence. That is not cold. It is wise. And now I want to talk about silence, because this is such a misunderstood form of power. People often think silence means surrender in the weak sense, as though if you do not immediately answer, you are somehow less worthy or less strong or less clear. But no, my dear, sometimes silence is the clearest thing in the room. Sometimes silence says, I will not join you there. Sometimes silence says, I know who I am, and I do not need to spend my peace proving it. Sometimes silence says, this conversation is not a place where truth is possible right now. So I choose not to throw myself into it. That is not domination in the harsh, egoic sense. It is not a game. It is not manipulation. It is not some icy performance meant to make the other person suffer. That is not the tone I want here. I want you to hear silence as a boundary, as a refusal to be pulled out of yourself, as a gentle but very firm, "No, thank you. I will not enter this chaos to earn the right to respect myself." Silence is a boundary, not a disappearance. That is a very important distinction. You are not vanishing. You are remaining with yourself. There are times when people attack because they are hungry for reaction. They want your nervous system. They want your emotional blood pressure. They want the proof that they have entered your center and rearranged the furniture. And when you do not give them that reaction, when you become still instead of combustible, something changes in the whole exchange. They feel the absence of the old access. They feel the door, not slammed cruelly, simply not open. And that can be very disorienting to someone who is used to being fed by your explanation, your panic, your oversharing, your self-defense. This is why silence can feel so powerful. Not because you are controlling them, but because you are no longer giving them your interior for free. You are no longer handing over information, weakness, and emotional energy just because they knocked loudly enough. There is something very healing about realizing that you may stop over-explaining. You may stop trying to be understood by force. You may stop believing that respect only comes after enough words. You do not have to answer in order to deserve respect. You already do. The answer is not what gives you dignity. Your being does. I know many sensitive people struggle here because they were trained to explain themselves into safety. If someone was upset, explain more. If someone misunderstood, explain more. If someone crossed the line, explain more. If someone demanded access, explain more. And after years of this, the body begins thinking that explanation is survival. But sweetheart, constant explaining is often just fear trying to soften the blow by giving away too much of you. There is a better way, a softer, stronger way, not silence from shutdown, but silence from self-possession. Not silence because you have nothing to say, but silence because you know this moment does not deserve all of you. That is very different, and you can feel the difference in the body. Shut down silence feels frozen. Boundaried silence feels grounded. One leaves you far away from yourself. The other leaves you more deeply inside yourself. That is the silence I want for you. The kind that can breathe. The kind that is warm, not brittle. The kind that says, "I'm not available for this," without hatred. So let us make this practical, because I want you to have phrases that are simple, human, and clean, not speeches, not essays, not emotional dissertations written in real time while your heart is pounding, just soft boundaries. I hear you. There is so much grace in that sentence. It does not agree. It does not surrender your truth. It simply says, I have heard the sound. Sometimes that is enough. Then, if more is needed, I'm not available for this conversation. Such a loving sentence, so direct, so calm. It does not insult, it does not justify, it does not over-negotiate. It simply tells the truth. And then this beautiful one, I'm choosing peace. I love that because it returns the whole moment to your values instead of their drama. It says, this is not about who can speak the fastest or cut the deepest. This is about where I live inside myself when this moment is over. These are not defensive phrases. They are guiding phrases. They keep you close to your own center. They let you leave without betrayal of the self. And that matters. Sometimes the most self-loving thing you can do is say less. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back before the old pattern gets fed. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is not explain your heart to someone who has already chosen not to handle it carefully. This does not mean you become distant from everyone. It means you become discerning. It means you stop pouring sacred energy into places that only know how to waste it. And that discernment is a form of peace, a form of healing, a form of maturity. You do not need to become louder to become stronger. Often you become stronger by becoming quieter in the right places. So if you find yourself triggered today, remember this. Pause, acknowledge, unclench, select, exit if needed. Feel what happens when you do not rush. Feel what happens when you stop thinking that every invitation into conflict is a summons you must obey. Feel what happens when silence becomes a home instead of a punishment. Put your hand on your heart and say, very softly, my peace is my power. I choose my response. I trust the universe. Then, if a boundary is needed, let it be small and clean. I hear you. I'm not available for this conversation. I'm choosing peace. That is enough, more than enough, because you are not here to win every exchange. You are here to keep your own soul intact. You don't have to be strong right now, just open. Open enough to hear something your nervous system may have forgotten. Open enough to let the shoulders come down. Open enough to stop performing for one little moment. So many people spend their lives trying to prove they are kind, available, understanding, forgiving, easy to reach, easy to use, easy to pull into conversations that do not nourish them, easy to summon, easy to drain. And because they are praised for being so nice or so dependable, they begin confusing over-availability with love. But my dear, love is not the same thing as constant access. Kindness is not the same thing as self-erasure. Being a loving human being does not mean you must always be within reach of everyone's moods, needs, demands, confusions, and poor timing. There is a softness that is holy, and there is a softness that has forgotten how to protect itself. I want to talk to you about the difference. I want to talk to you about why your time matters, why your presence matters, why your absence sometimes teaches more than your explanation ever could. And why not rushing in can be one of the most self-loving things you ever learn. Because some of you have been handing yourselves out in pieces and then wondering why you feel so thin at the end of the day. It is not because you are selfish to need space. It is because you were never meant to be public property. You were never meant to be available on demand just because you have a loving heart. A loving heart still needs a front door. A loving heart still needs hours that belong to its own healing, its own rest, its own becoming. And when you begin to understand that, something very beautiful happens. You stop being less loving. You become more honest. My time is sacred. Let that enter you before we go further, not as a slogan, as truth. When you are always there, always answering, always adjusting, always making room, always stepping in before anyone has even learned how to hold themselves properly, people may begin to treat your presence like running water from a faucet. They turn it on without thought. They assume it will be there. They forget it costs something. They forget it comes from a living source, not an endless machine. And then, because you are tender, because you do love, because you do want peace, you keep giving and giving, hoping that maybe if you are gentle enough, available enough, useful enough, they will naturally become more careful with you. But that is not always how life works. What is constantly available is often unconsciously undervalued, not because people are evil, because human beings quickly normalize what is always there. They begin treating access as default instead of gift. They begin assuming your time belongs to them because you have never gently taught them otherwise. This is why boundaries are not the opposite of love. Boundaries are one of the ways love stays alive without becoming resentful. Limits do not take love away. Limits keep love safe. They tell the body, you are not required to hemorrhage in order to be kind. They tell the heart, you may remain warm without becoming wide open to everything. They tell other people, without cruelty, my presence is valuable, and I will not cheapen it by making it endlessly available. There is something very healing in learning this, especially if you were raised to believe that a good person always says yes, always explains, always accommodates, always responds, always picks up, always smooths, always understands. No, sweetheart, a whole person does not always do that. A whole person listens inwardly first. A whole person knows when silence is wiser than instant access. A whole person knows that not every request is sacred simply because it is urgent to someone else. I think some of you are afraid that if you become less available, you will be less loved. That is such an old fear, and I want to sit beside it for a moment with tenderness. Because very often that fear was shaped long ago. It says, if I do not give quickly enough, I may lose connection. If I do not answer immediately, I may be rejected. If I do not keep showing up before I am ready, I may disappoint someone and then be left. So you over-offer. You preemptively explain. You rush, You smooth, you volunteer your energy before anyone has even earned that level of closeness. And then the heart wonders why it feels tired, unseen, strangely used. But the answer is not self-blame. The answer is relearning safety. Relearning that you may step back and still be lovable. Relearning that you may be slower, quieter, more measured, and still be good. Relearning that love, which disappears when you create a healthy boundary, was never really resting on truth to begin with. You do not lose real love by becoming more defined. You simply stop feeding bonds that depended on your endless self-abandonment. That is a very different thing. If your presence has no edge, no shape, no season, no rhythm, then other people cannot really learn its value. But when your presence is chosen, clean, conscious, and not automatic, it gains weight. It becomes felt. It becomes respected. It becomes something people meet with greater care. Scarcity, in this sense, is not manipulation. It is not playing games. It is not withholding affection to make people chase you. That is not the energy I mean at all. I mean sacredness. I mean not treating your own life as an unlimited free resource. I mean having hours that belong to your nervous system. I mean not saying yes before your soul has even answered. I mean allowing your presence to have shape so that when you do give it, it is whole. And this is why I love the sentence, "My time is sacred," because it reminds you that your days are not random scraps to be handed away in panic. Your attention is your life. Your time is the shape of your love. Your hours are where your becoming happens. Your quiet is where your healing happens. Your solitude is where your inner truth clears. So when you guard your time, you are not becoming selfish. You are becoming responsible for the one life that has actually been given to you. I want you to imagine a beautiful garden for a moment. You do not let everyone walk through it in muddy shoes at all hours, simply because you are a kind person. You decide when the gate opens. You decide what gets planted. You decide what gets pulled out. You decide when the soil rests. If you let everyone in all the time, there will soon be no garden left, only footprints and noise. Your energy is like that. Your attention is like that. Your peace is like that. And if you have been feeling depleted lately, perhaps it is not because you are weak. Perhaps it is because too many things have had open access to a sacred place. So let us change that without drama, without hardness, without becoming bitter, just with truth. A slower reply, a clearer no, a returned call later, if later is what keeps you whole. A message unanswered until the body is calm enough to choose. A visit shortened before resentment begins. A pause before agreeing. A refusal to leap into every emotional emergency as though your whole worth depends on your usefulness. These are not little things. These are the architecture of self-respect. And now I want to go somewhere even quieter and stronger with you, because once you begin valuing your own presence, you also begin understanding something else. You do not have to act in order to win. This is such a difficult lesson for the reactive mind, because the reactive mind thinks victory comes from immediate explanation, immediate defense, immediate correction, immediate visible effort. It thinks if someone misunderstands you, you must explain. If someone criticizes you, you must answer. If someone speaks falsely, you must chase it down. If someone wants to bait you, you must show up and prove your innocence, your goodness, your intentions, your pain. But my dear, not every battle deserves a soldier, and not every misunderstanding deserves your life force. Some things dissolve when they are not fed. Some people reveal themselves more clearly when you stop dancing with them. Some dramas starve when they do not get your nervous system as fuel. And some truths grow stronger in silence than they ever could in argument. Sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful move, not because you are passive, because you are discerning, because you understand that your peace is too expensive to waste on proving yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. This is one of the most freeing things you will ever learn. You do not owe long explanations to people who have already decided their version of you is more convenient than the truth. You do not owe your deepest emotional labor to those who only want your reaction, not your reality. You do not have to attend every false story about you as if it were court summons from God. There is such relief in dropping the need to clear your name in every room. Some rooms are not interested in truth, only in motion. They want you moving, defending, reacting, circling, justifying. They want your energy more than your honesty. And once you see that, once you truly see it, it becomes easier to leave, not dramatically, not with bitterness, just with wisdom. Silence is not surrender there. Silence is self-possession. Silence says, I know what this is, and I will not build a home in it. Silence says, my life is too beautiful to spend it, proving I am not what your wound needs me to be. Silence says, I do not need to answer every noise in order to remain true. And yes, there are times to speak. Of course there are. There are times when clarity is loving, when truth is necessary, when one direct sentence changes a relationship for the better. But this is different from compulsive explaining. This is different from anxious over-proving. This is different from emotional volunteering in hostile rooms. The art here is discernment. The art is learning the difference between a conversation where truth can live and a conversation that only feeds on your effort. When you know the difference, life becomes much lighter. You stop entering arenas where your soul never wanted to fight. You stop thinking every accusation is an invitation to perform. You stop wasting your breath on people who are not listening from love. Do not explain yourself to people committed to getting you wrong. That is not cold. That is mercy toward your own spirit. And then something beautiful begins happening when you stop overacting, over-explaining, over-defending. Your life itself becomes your answer. Your choices become your answer. Your peace becomes your answer. Your consistency becomes your answer. Your fruit becomes your answer. Results are the strongest explanation. I do not mean success in the shallow worldly sense only. I mean the visible reality of who you are becoming. If someone thinks you are unstable and you become steady, that steadiness says more than paragraphs ever could. If someone expects you to collapse into drama and you remain gentle, clear, and whole, that wholeness speaks. If someone misreads your boundaries as cruelty, and over time your life becomes more peaceful, more fruitful, more truthful, then the peace itself becomes explanation, not to convince them, perhaps. That is no longer the point, but because reality quietly reveals what argument cannot. A tree does not explain itself, it grows. A river does not defend itself, it keeps moving. A healed person does not need to narrate every inch of the journey in order for the healing to be real. It becomes visible, it becomes felt, and there is such strength in that, such rest in that. To live well instead of argue well, to become instead of explain, to let your life answer for you where words would only scatter your energy. I want you to imagine how much of your vitality could return if you stopped trying to correct every wrong impression. How much of your sweetness could stay with you if you stopped entering every pointless struggle? How much clearer your inner voice could become if you stopped talking over it with endless explanations meant for people who are not truly listening. That is the winning I am speaking of. Not domination, not revenge, not passive-aggressive silence. I mean the serene strength of someone who knows their own center well enough not to leave it every time the world gets noisy. The old self thinks winning means being recognized as right. The wiser self knows winning often means staying at peace, staying honest, staying in your body, staying available for what really matters, instead of being drained by what never did. That is a deeper kind of victory. It does not always look dramatic from the outside, but it feels like freedom from the inside. So now, sweetheart, if there is some situation in your life where you keep feeling pulled to over-explain, over-offer, over-prove, just pause and ask, what am I trying to earn here that belongs to me already? Respect, innocence, goodness, worth, safety? If it already belongs to you, then you do not need to go begging for it in the wrong room. You need to come back to yourself. You need to remember your sacredness. You need to let the shoulders soften and the jaw unclench and say, no, I will not keep spending myself here. Maybe the most loving thing you do today is answer later. Maybe the wisest thing is say less. Maybe the bravest thing is not attend the little trial in someone else's mind. Maybe the highest form of self-respect available to you right now is a quiet boundary and a turned body. That is enough, truly enough. So let us gather this together gently. Your presence is not ordinary. Your attention is not cheap. Your time is not public property. My time is sacred. Let that be one truth, and this also. You do not have to act in order to remain powerful. Sometimes the most elegant answer is your continued peace. Sometimes the most intelligent answer is no answer. Sometimes the most loving answer is distance. Sometimes the strongest explanation is the life you quietly build after you stop trying to convince everyone to see you correctly. Let your results speak. Let your peace speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let your wholeness speak. And if the world still misunderstands sometimes, let it. The sky remains the sky even when someone calls it gray. The river remains the river even when someone stands on the bank and misreads its depth. You remain you, sweetheart, even without an audience of agreement. So breathe now. Let your shoulders fall again. Feel the relief of not having to prove everything. Feel the relief of not having to be available to everyone. Feel the relief of not entering every meaningless race. And say with me slowly, my time is sacred. My peace is my power. I choose my response. I trust the universe. Let that be enough for today. Let that be your quiet strength. Let that be the way you keep yourself. There comes a strange kind of freedom, my dear, after you stop explaining yourself all the time. At first, it can feel almost unfamiliar, like walking out of a noisy room and hearing the quiet ring in your ears. You may even feel a little guilty. You may wonder if you are being cold, if you are being distant, if you are doing something wrong because you are no longer rushing to soften every misunderstanding or defend every innocent part of yourself. But then, very slowly, something inside you begins to stand up straighter. The energy that was always leaning outward starts returning home. The part of you that was always asking, "Do you understand me now? Am I all right now? May I be myself now?" begins to grow quiet because it is no longer begging at the wrong doors. And that changes everything. It changes the way you walk into a room. It changes what your body feels like at the end of a hard conversation. It changes what kind of people can stay close to you. When you stop over-explaining, your whole vibration changes. You stop living from submission and start living from self-possession. Not arrogance, not hardness, presence. The old version of you may have felt she needed to earn the right to exist by being endlessly understandable. The newer, calmer self knows something else. You do not need permission to be who you are. You take your life back the moment you stop asking permission to be yourself. That is why some relationships begin shifting the moment you grow quieter. Imbalanced relationships often survive on over-explanation. They survive on one person chasing clarity, while the other person keeps taking, testing, pulling, doubting, or demanding more. They survive on emotional overlabor. But the minute you stop feeding that pattern, something becomes visible. The relationships built on unequal access begin wobbling. The ones that required you to stay anxious in order to remain connected begin losing their grip. And that can feel sad at first, because even unhealthy closeness can still feel familiar. But do not be frightened by the empty spaces that appear when false balance falls away. Those spaces are not punishment, they are openings. They make room for relationships with more honesty, more steadiness, more reciprocity, more calm. Real connection does not need you to explain yourself into exhaustion. Real love does not need endless evidence that you deserve basic respect. Real kindness does not feed on your nervous system. So, if some bonds grow thin when you stop overgiving your words, let them. That thinning may be grace, that silence may be sorting. Life often removes what could only stay through your self-abandonment so that something truer has room to arrive. Silent confidence speaks very loudly. It tells the world, I do not need to run after understanding. I am willing to be seen by what is honest and left by what is not. And there is another beautiful thing here. You stop being a supporting character inside everybody else's story about you. Do you know how many people live that way without realizing it? They keep adjusting themselves according to what someone else has projected onto them. If another person thinks they are selfish, they rush to prove they are generous. If someone thinks they are cold, they pour out extra warmth. If someone misunderstands their boundary, they begin writing long emotional essays, trying to make it sound softer, nicer, more understandable. And after a while, they are no longer living from their own center at all. They are reacting to someone else's script. But sweetheart, you are not here to be a character in another person's distortion of you. You are the author of your own life. That does not mean you never listen, never reflect, never learn. Of course you do, but you stop handing the pen away. You stop letting every outside reaction rewrite your identity. And the day that happens, a tremendous amount of strength comes back into the body. Because authorship is quiet. Authorship does not need to shout. It simply says, no, that is not my line. No, that is not the scene I am living in. No, that is not who I am becoming. Then it turns the page. There is so much peace in that, so much relief. This is why calm matters so much. Calm is not only a mood, calm is a declaration. Every time you remain grounded instead of spinning outward, every time you breathe before reacting, every time you soften the jaw and feel your feet and choose not to climb into unnecessary turbulence, you are sending a message to the whole inner world. I am safe. That message is gold. The nervous system listens for it all day long. And when you stop reacting automatically, when you stop over-explaining as though your survival depends on being understood immediately, the body starts learning a new rhythm. It says, we do not have to go to war each time something uncomfortable appears. We can stay, we can breathe, we can choose. This is why calm is such a powerful, energetic statement to the universe too. It says, I trust there is support here. I trust I do not have to control every ripple. I trust I can take the next step without proving the whole path. That is a very different vibration from panic. Panic says, I am alone, I must force, I must fix, I must explain until the danger goes away. Calm says, I am here, I am supported, I may respond without abandoning myself. One contracts life, the other opens it. So let us make this very gentle and very practical now. If something unsettles you today, if someone says something sharp, if a message arrives with strange energy, if an old urge rises in you to explain yourself into safety, do not argue with yourself first. Come back to the body. Feel your feet touching the ground. Really feel them. Let your jaw soften. Let the shoulders drop, even 1 little inch. Then breathe in slowly for 4 counts, and inside that inhale whisper, I am safe. Let the inhale fill the chest without strain. Then breathe out for 6, maybe 8 counts if it feels natural. And as the breath leaves, say, I release this. Again, inhale, I am safe. Exhale, I release this. That little rhythm can change the whole conversation between you and your nervous system. It tells the body, you do not have to prepare for attack right now. It tells the mind, we are not giving this moment full authority. It tells the heart, you are still here. Breath is one of the ways you speak directly to the nervous system, not by lecturing it, by rhythm, by softness, by staying present long enough for the chemistry to change. Stay with the breath a little longer. Let the exhale be the part that carries the old urge out of the body, not because you are suppressing the feeling, but because you are no longer making a throne for it. Inhale, I am safe. Exhale, I release this. Feel how different that is from, I must fix this. Feel the difference between release and collapse. You are not giving up your power here. You are gathering it. You are taking it back from whatever little storm was trying to rent space in your body. The more you do this, the more your system begins trusting that you are not going to throw it into every fight. And that is one of the deepest forms of self-love there is. Then, when the breath has softened you a little, let these words come quietly. I do my part, and I release the rest. Such a wise sentence. Such a merciful sentence. It keeps you in your lane without making you helpless. Your part may be to breathe, to tell the truth, to say no, to leave the room, to wait before replying, to pray, to rest, to write it down instead of sending it, to let the day move on. That is your part. But the rest, the interpretation, the timing, the outcome, the way other people choose to understand or misread or change or not change, that is not all yours to carry. It never was. So say it again if you need to. I do my part, and I release the rest. And then this lovely line, the universe can handle what I cannot. Let that fall right into the places where you still try to become the manager of everything. You are not weak because you cannot carry it all. You are human. The universe is wider than your control, kinder than your panic, and more capable than your tight little planning mind. Trusting that does not make you passive. It makes you sane. And perhaps this is the quiet miracle of the whole teaching. When you trust the universe, you stop performing, you stop proving, you stop using your energy to chase understanding from people who are not listening, outcomes that are not ripe, and peace that only comes when you stop demanding it on your terms. Trust allows you to relax into your own truth. It allows the body to rest a little more inside itself. It allows silence to become a boundary instead of a fear. It allows stillness to become strength. It allows you to stay calm, not because nothing is difficult, but because difficulty no longer gets the whole house. When you trust the universe, you stop needing to prove so much. And that, my dear, is one of the sweetest freedoms you will ever taste. So tonight or tomorrow, or the next time life reaches for your old reactive self, remember this: you do not need to explain your soul into safety. You do not need to answer every misunderstanding. You do not need to react in order to be real. You may pause. You may breathe. You may choose peace. You may let the silence stand between you and the old pattern like a gentle gate. You may feel your feet. You may soften your jaw. You may tell the nervous system the truth: I am safe. You may release what does not belong in your body. You may do your part and leave the rest in wiser hands. And before we close, let me place these words in your heart the way I would, softly, simply, like setting down a cup of warm tea beside you. My peace is my power. I choose my response. I trust the universe. I am safe right now. I do my part, and I release the rest. The universe can handle what I cannot. Let those be enough. Let them be your calm. Let them be your quiet strength. Let them be the hand on your shoulder as you walk away from what no longer deserves your energy. All is well, my dear, and so it is.